What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain. Welcome to episode 126 of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow, and share the link with your friends. Or click on the support link in this episode's description. Your donation of any amount could change a life. If you'd like to get our curriculum, you can get the paperback or ebook of From Ashes to Destiny on Amazon. When we come back, we'll get into this episode entitled, When the Music Stops. Welcome back to episode 126 of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast entitled, When the Music Stops. My inspiration for this episode came from a quote by Michael Tilson Thomas, an American pianist, composer, and world-renowned symphony conductor, and he said, and I quote, "What happens when the music stops? Where does it go?" So today I'm posing that and other questions to our group of friends in recovery from the U.S., South Africa, and Australia. And guys, I want to thank you for your participation in this group. Here's 3 quotes for you guys to think about and choose one that hits you the most. First one is by Voight on Chicago PD, and he said in one episode, quote, "When the music stops, that's when the pain hits." The second quote is anonymous, and it says, "When the music stops and your game is gone, who will remember you?" And finally, the third, what happens to the party when the music stops? Okay, guys, I guess you've got the theme for today. So, Ben, would you like to start us off? Sure, David. I actually like all of them, but I'll talk about the first one and the third one. Number 1 to me says, when the music stops, that's when the pain hits. Man, I remember being in bands, and once the show was over, there seemed to be a big lack of direction on where we should go and what we should do. It usually ends at a party, and you already know what happens there. Just a lot of empty people looking for something to fill the void, which usually wound up the next day having a lot of pain, either a hangover or regret. Nowadays, still being in bands, number 3 seems to be more applicable to me. What happens when the music stops? Where does it go? Well, I would like to challenge anybody who thinks the music stops and it's over and experiences some kind of pain that the music doesn't have to stop. It can continue on in your heart. One of my favorite Bible verses says, "Always be singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord." I think we all have a life song, or some have called it a heart song. If you can have a song turning in your heart and mind, at that time you really don't need a band or a musical experience on the outside of you because it's in your heart. Those are nice, and I love concerts, and I love performing on stage. But these days, having rejected the life of drug addiction, I like to keep a melody in my heart so that the music doesn't have to go away with my emotions. I can keep it right here and enjoy a continual sound in my heart. Wow, Ben, great start, and it's always good to start a question like this with a full-time musician. Gary, which one would you like to respond to? David, for me, the first quote resonates literally and figuratively. You see, the day my wife died was when the music stopped for me. Music in the capacity to have fun, relax, or unwind, however you phrase it. It was unnecessary for me and an essential way to take my foot off the accelerator in a life in which most things felt like a never-ending race, in which sometimes I was an unwilling participant. It was always a race to keep ahead of the pack in an attempt to not get left behind or fall through the cracks, as it were. So the opportunity to relax when it came provided an opportunity to renew spent energy in this usually involved sitting down, having a braai in the time-honored South African way, and of course music, which soothed my frayed nerves and settled heightened senses. My wife and I loved music, and our tastes were similar. That was one of the first pleasures that drew us together. Since her passing, however, I find it difficult to enjoy myself and play the music that helped during those times of relaxation, and especially since the music that I enjoyed reminded me of the woman that I loved and now missed so much. It was like a significant part of me had died with her. That is also when I started drinking heavily. The pain of loss never goes away, but really, I have to say, the drinking didn't help, and since I've given my life to Jesus, I've been able to cope and leave my addiction to alcohol behind me. In Him, I have found purpose, and this has restored me to be all I can be and given me a new life. Wow. Thanks so much, Gary. It's interesting to hear that transition of losing music because of the pain of grief. And Shaw, big shout out for the South African braai. Harry, how about you? David, I'd like to talk about number 3, because to me, the party relates to my life, and the music is substance abuse or addiction. So what happens to my life when I stop the addictions? Firstly, I can think back of how I couldn't face people again, being in a sound frame of mind. The guilt and embarrassment I held made me hide from people. I couldn't go back into a society at that time because all of the hurts and problems that I had caused to others. I remember for the first 3 months while I was early in recovery, I isolated myself so much and just prayed to God for forgiveness and to work in the hearts of all those people that I hurt or offended to get them to forgive me. Well, these 3 months became a really difficult 2 years. And finally, I had to come to terms with going back to everyone I caused hurt and offended and plead for their forgiveness. Many people refused to speak to me and chased me away. Some heard me out and forgave me, while others heard me out, forgave me, and told me they never want to see me or speak to me again. So as I stand here today, life's journey has not been easy when the music stops. You just need to be strong enough to accept life's challenges and know that 90% of old friendships and family will never be the same again. And people will pull away from you, and rightly so. We need to regroup and start living our life differently. And for me, that's a more righteous life with the Lord. Shaw. Thanks so much, Harry. That is a really good picture of how when the music stops and we need to really begin to look at the pain that we caused other people as well. Eddie, how about you? Yes, David, for me, it's the party scene also. You see, like puppets, the music and the hype just strung me along, and they string us all along. The dancing, higher and higher, and then it stops. Just like that, the down begins to set in. The roller coaster ride to the bottom. Emotions all over the place. Mind games, withdrawals, disappointment, guilt, depression, all hitting you in the face as you try to duck and dive. Eventually, you hit the bottom, broken and in pain, alone, just you. You know this place all too well. You have been coming here more often than you would have liked, but it just keeps drawing you back, the music of addiction. Only way to get free is to cut those puppet strings, break those chains, and be set free. For me, that came through being set free by Christ, because the music that He brings joy and not the hurt of addiction. Shaw. Thanks so much. That is really a good message for all of us, Eddie. Dante, which one do you relate to? David, for me, it's the second one. When the music stops, who is going to remember you when you're gone? I've often in the past thought about who would be at my funeral and what the number of people would be at my funeral. It was a pretty prideful thing, I know, thinking well of myself and thinking that many people would be there and people would mourn me. Now that I have a wife and children and a good career, it's more about being good to people and leaving the results to God. With Him, I have everything, and without Him, I have nothing. At least, nothing that is going to last beyond this life. I believe the greatest legacy I can leave is pointing other people to Jesus. By my conduct, by my speech, by how I carry myself in different situations, and sharing the good news that I have in my heart in all different contexts. And doing so with people who cross my path, whether it be for a moment or for a lifetime, because now I know who's going to remember me when I'm gone. Wow. Good word, Dante. Charlie, would you like to close it out for us? Sure, David, because I can pick right up where Dante left off. My whole life, I've had this feeling that why live when it's only struggling, pain, and then death? I always felt like no one needed me except for my grandmother, but even she turned me away at times. I always felt like anything I said was useless and that nothing made any sense, and that one day something would sneak up and take me out of this world. I always felt like I wanted at least to see it coming. I can recall at high school where the question was, what do you want to be when you graduate? Or what would you hope to contribute to the world? Everyone else wrote things like, I want to be a doctor, I want to cure world hunger, I want to be a superstar, but not me. I wrote, I just want to be someone that somebody remembers. Wow. Makes me cry just saying this. It's emotional because now that I found Jesus, I know the truth. I have the answers. I know who wins. I know where I'm going. I know who will always remember me. It's the Father who created me. Oh, I love you, Lord. And as to when the music stops, I relate that to my purpose, the reason I'm here. Before I found God in recovery, I had no clue. I was just trying to die, man. Like, bring on the crazy so it might take me out. But really, I was afraid to die. Thankfully, God has other plans for me. He saved me for something. My mom was right when she said all those times that I almost died, the Lord is saving you for something. All these life events led me up to His will for my life once I surrendered it to Him. Now I can help people and share God's word, which is where our real help comes from. And I'm making so many connections with people. Surely some are going to remember me. But when the music stops and it's just me and empty space, I can still pick up my will and get crazy again. But thankfully, my faith pulls me back into focus, and I focus my eyes on my higher power. And the spirit of peace and comfort just washes over me. I'm human, and sometimes I can't get there on my own. So I thank God I have a connection with these godly men and women in my life who obviously remember me because they pull me up out of the dark light and into the glorious light of Christ. Bam! Awesome closing, Charlie. I like the way you understand who will remember you now, and you're good with all of those people who forget you from your past during the party scene. Thanks, guys. This has been an awesome, awesome group, and I'm sure you've touched a lot of people. Thanks for listening to this episode of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast. If you would like to join an online group or get one-on-one counseling to help you when the music stops, please message me on the link in this podcast or by email at davidfroma2d@gmail.com, or go to my website www.froma2d.org and click on the contact page. You can keep in touch with what we're doing in From A to D by following me on Instagram at davidfroma2d. Tune in Monday for our next episode, and as always, stay safe and stay strong.